The glass doors of the Marquis Grand Hotel glided open with a soft whoosh, releasing a wave of air, conditioned coolness, that was almost as sharp as the glances that followed her in. Aisha Carter adjusted the strap of her worn leather duffel on her shoulder and took a deep breath before stepping inside. She had spent the last 4 hours on a delayed flight and another hour trying to get a cab in the pouring rain. All she wanted now was a warm shower, a quiet room, and maybe a hot meal before tomorrow's conference. But as she walked across the gleaming marble floor, she could already feel eyes crawling over her. The same kind of stares she had known her whole life. Judging, measuring, dismissing. The Marquis was known as one of the city's most exclusive hotels, the kind of place corporate elites and foreign dignitaries preferred. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations, and the front desk staff stood behind their polished counters like gatekeepers to another world. Aisha, dressed in simple jeans, sneakers, and a rain-soaked jacket, looked nothing like their usual clientele, and they noticed. "Can I help you?" the man at the counter asked, his smile too thin to be genuine. His name tag read Robert, Guest Relations Manager. He looked her up and down, lingering a second too long on her natural curls and damp backpack. "Yes," Aisha said calmly. "I have a reservation." Carter, Aisha Carter. Robert's eyebrow arched. "A reservation." He tapped on his screen, skepticism practically dripping from his voice. "And what kind of room did you book?" "A standard suite," she said, pulling out her phone to show the confirmation email. "Booked it last month." He glanced at the screen, then at her again. He muttered, lips curling into a smirk. "We usually require a credit card on file for that level of room." "Did you provide one?" "Yes." "It should already be on record." She kept her tone polite but firm. She'd dealt with men like Robert before. The kind who believed courtesy was optional, if they decided you didn't belong. He typed a few more keys and sighed dramatically. "Well, Miss Carter, it looks like you booked a standard room, not a suite. And, unfortunately, those are currently unavailable. The only thing I can offer you tonight is one of our economy singles in the rear wing." Aisha blinked. "That's not what I paid for." "I booked a suite?" "Yes, well." Robert said with a dismissive shrug, "Maybe there was an error on your end. These things happen. But if you want to stay here tonight, I'm afraid that's the only option." A couple standing behind her snickered quietly, and Aisha felt the heat rise in her chest. She glanced around. The lobby was filled with men in tailored suits, women in designer dresses, all gliding past as if she were invisible. But she wasn't invisible. She was being judged. "All right," she said finally. "How much is the economy room?" He smirked. $400. Aisha stared at him. $400. For the worst room in the hotel. "It's our standard rate," Robert replied. "But if that's too expensive, there's a motel about 10 minutes down the road." The insult was deliberate. Aisha's hands clenched at her sides, but she forced herself to stay composed. "I'll take it," she said. The economy room. Robert looked disappointed. He had expected her to storm out, to prove that she didn't belong in this world. Instead, she reached into her purse and slid her card across the counter. "Charge it." He swiped it with a smug smile. "As you wish. I hope the room meets your expectations." "It will," she said quietly, her eyes never leaving his. As he handed her the key card, Robert couldn't resist a final jab. "Oh, and Ms. Carter. Breakfast is not included with that type of room." "Noted," she replied, turning away before he could see the faint smile forming on her lips. What Robert didn't know, what no one here knew, was that Aisha Carter was not just another wary traveler. She was the founder and CEO of Carter Global Holdings, a tech firm that had just signed a $1 billion merger with an international conglomerate. And tomorrow morning, she was scheduled to speak as the keynote guest at the very conference this hotel was hosting, a conference the Marquess itself was sponsoring. But for now, she let him think she was nobody. The room was, as expected, a disappointment. Small, windowless, and smelling faintly of bleach and stale carpet. But Aisha barely noticed. She dropped her bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out her laptop. The email she typed was short and polite, addressed to the hotel's board of directors. It included her reservation details, the treatment she had received, and a simple note, "We'll discuss this tomorrow." The next morning, the lobby buzzed with activity. Photographers, executives, and journalists milled about as banners for the International Tech Leadership Summit were set up near the elevators. Robert was there too, wearing the same condescending smile as he checked in VIP guests. He didn't even glance at Aisha when she walked by in a tailored navy suit and heels, her presence commanding and confident. It wasn't until she stepped onto the stage of the grand ballroom, introduced as Aisha Carter, visionary founder of Carter Global, that his jaw dropped. The room erupted in applause as she took the podium, her voice steady and powerful as she spoke about innovation, diversity, and the future of global technology. From his place at the back of the room, Robert felt the blood drain from his face. The woman he had mocked, the one he'd tried to humiliate, was the star of the very event his hotel was hosting. And, as he watched executives line up afterward to shake her hand, he knew his life was about to change. What he didn't know was that Aisha was just getting started. Because this wasn't just about a room. It was about respect, and teaching people like Robert a lesson they'd never forget. The ballroom remained filled with thunderous applause as Aisha concluded her keynote speech. She thanked the audience, waved gracefully, and stepped off stage into a sea of corporate elites eager to meet her. Dozens of reporters shouted questions. Photographers snapped pictures, and investors whispered to each other, already calculating what partnership with Carter Global Holdings might mean for their future. But through the crowd, Aisha's eyes found one man, Robert, the guest relations manager who had mocked her less than 24 hours earlier. He stood frozen near the back wall, his expression an uneasy cocktail of embarrassment, fear, and disbelief. Their eyes met for just a second. She didn't need to say a word. The slow, knowing smile that curved her lips said it all. "Ms. Carter," called a voice beside her. It was Thomas Grayson, one of the Marquess Grand's board members. "Brilliant presentation. Absolutely brilliant. Would you mind joining us in the executive suite for a private luncheon? We'd love to discuss a partnership with Carter Global." "Of course," Aisha replied smoothly. Led the way. As they walked, she deliberately passed by the front desk. Robert's hands fidgeted nervously with a stack of check and forms, and he avoided her gaze. She paused, turning to him with calm, polite composure. "Good morning, Robert," she said. His throat bobbed. "Gee, good morning, Ms. Carter. Thank you for the room last night," she continued evenly. "I hope the economy wing wasn't too much trouble." Robert's face turned crimson. I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't." She cut in gently. "That's the point, isn't it?" Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, words caught in his throat. The luncheon was everything the hotel had promised. A sprawling dining room overlooking the city skyline, silver platters of gourmet food, and champagne flutes that sparkled like liquid gold. Executives from the Marquess parent company circled Aisha like bees around honey, eager to align themselves with her rising star. "You've built something truly remarkable, Ms. Carter," said Eleanor Chambers, the chairwoman of the board. "We've been looking for partners to help modernize our brand, Your company's reputation for innovation and diversity is exactly what we need." Aisha smiled graciously, but her mind was elsewhere. "I'm glad you feel that way," she said. "Because before I consider any partnership, there's a matter we need to address." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the culture here," Aisha said calmly. "I was insulted and humiliated by one of your managers last night because of how I look. He tried to relegate me to the worst room in this building and made jokes about it." The room fell silent. Thomas cleared his throat. "That's unacceptable. I hope you reported it." "I didn't need to," Aisha replied. "He's standing behind your front desk right now." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Eleanor's expression hardened. "Consider it handled. That is not how the Marquis treats its guests." Aisha held up a hand. "I don't want him fired." That surprised them. "You don't?" Eleanor asked. "No," Aisha said. "I want him educated. I want every employee, from the bellhop to the general manager, trained to treat every guest with dignity. I want a new policy that ensures no one else ever experiences what I did." "You have my word," Eleanor said, nodding. "We'll implement diversity and sensitivity training immediately." "Good," Aisha replied. "Then we can talk business." It was a power move, one that didn't just demand respect for herself, but sought change for anyone who would ever walk into that hotel after her. That was what separated Aisha from people like Robert. She wasn't interested in revenge. She wanted transformation. Later that afternoon, as the conference wrapped up, Aisha returned to the lobby to collect her luggage. Robert was still there, visibly shaken. He stepped forward cautiously. "Ms. Carter, may I speak with you?" "Of course," she said, turning to face him. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I judged you without knowing anything about you. I assumed things I shouldn't have. And I'm sorry." Aisha studied him for a long moment. "Do you know why that's a problem, Robert?" "Because it was wrong," he said. "It's more than that," she replied gently. "It's because you thought my worth was based on what you saw. You thought my clothes, my skin, my luggage defined what I could afford or who I was. And that mindset is what hurts people like me every day." "I know," he said softly. "And I'll do better. I promise." "I hope so," she said. "Because next time, the person you belittle might not be someone with power. It might be someone without a voice. And they'll walk away believing they deserve that treatment." Robert's eyes glistened. "Thank you for giving me a chance to change." Aisha nodded and turned to leave, but paused. "Oh, one more thing." "Yes." "You charged me $400 for a room that wasn't worth $150," she said, a hint of humor in her voice. "I expect a refund." A nervous laugh escaped his lips. "Right away, Miss Carter." By evening, the story had spread beyond the hotel walls. Guests whispered about the mystery woman who'd humbled the staff. Social media buzzed with posts from conference attendees, praising her speech and her poise. Even the hotel's board released a public statement pledging to review guest experience policies and ensure equality in service. But for Aisha, the most powerful moment came the next morning, as she prepared to check out. A staff member approached her nervously with an envelope. "Ms. Carter," the woman said, "on behalf of the Marquis Grand, we'd like to offer you our presidential suite. Complimentary, for as long as you stay with us." Aisha raised an eyebrow. "The suite, huh? And all I had to do was pay for the worst room." The woman flushed but smiled. "You taught us a lesson we won't forget." Aisha accepted the envelope and tipped the staff generously. "Make sure no one else has to teach it again." As she walked through the lobby one final time, Robert held the door open for her. "Safe travels, Carter, thank you, she said with a smile. And Robert, next time assume nothing. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city shimmered beneath the morning sun, and as Aisha slid into the back seat of her waiting car, she reflected on the irony of it all. Yesterday, she had been the woman who didn't belong. Today, she was the woman who had changed an institution. But she wasn't finished, not even close. Because if there was one thing Aisha Carter had learned, it was that power was more than money or titles. It was the ability to rewrite the rules and make sure the next woman who walked through those doors would never again be judged by the color of her skin or the clothes on her back. The ride from the Marquis Grand to Carter Global Headquarters took only 20 minutes. But for Aisha, it felt like stepping from one world into another. The towering glass building reflected the morning light, symbolizing everything she had built from the ground up. A company that had gone from a one-woman startup in her garage to one of the most influential tech firms on the East Coast. Yet, despite all her achievements, yesterday's encounter reminded her of something she had learned long ago. No matter how high you climb, prejudice still finds a way to look down on you. As she walked through the lobby, her team greeted her with smiles and congratulations. "You were trending on social media last night," said Naomi, her head of PR. "Sweetie justice is everywhere." "Fef sweet justice," Aisha repeated with a small laugh. "People loved the story," Naomi explained. "The idea that someone tried to humiliate you and ended up exposing themselves instead, it's resonating. Thousands of women, especially Black women, are sharing their own experiences in hotels, restaurants, workplaces." Aisha listened quietly. It was powerful and humbling to know that one small act of dignity could spark a broader conversation. "Let's amplify those voices," she said. "Compile some of the stories and publish them on our corporate blog. This isn't just about me." "Already ahead of you," Naomi said with a grin. A few hours later, Aisha sat in the boardroom with her leadership team. They were preparing for a critical meeting with foreign investors who wanted to expand Carter Global into Europe. But as the team discussed numbers and logistics, Aisha's mind kept wandering back to the lobby of the Marquis. To the sneers, the condescension, the assumption that she didn't belong. When the meeting ended, she called Naomi back in. "Set up a meeting with the Marquis Grand's parent company. I want to propose a joint initiative." "On what?" Naomi asked. "On bias," Aisha said simply. "Specifically, how unconscious bias in customer service impacts businesses. We're going to help them fix this and turn their mistake into an opportunity." The next week, Aisha returned to the Marquis. But this time, she wasn't alone. A team of Carter Global consultants accompanied her, armed with research, training modules, and a bold vision to help the hotel chain transform its service culture from the ground up. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about change. Robert was there, too. This time in the back of the room, listening intently as Aisha presented to the hotel's senior leadership. "BS isn't always loud," she explained. "Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's a raised eyebrow, a dismissive tone, a decision based on assumption rather than fact. But the impact is real and measurable." She clicked to the next slide. "Studies show that companies with inclusive service cultures have 30% higher customer satisfaction and 20% better retention rates. Bias doesn't just hurt people, it hurts profits." The executives nodded, scribbling notes. Aisha glanced briefly at Robert. His posture was different now, less arrogant, more attentive. Perhaps he was starting to understand. When the presentation ended, Eleanor Chambers approached her. "I have to admit, Miss Carter, I didn't expect you to take this route. Most people would have sued us." Aisha smiled. Swing you might have made headlines, but changing you, that will make history. The new partnership, called Project Dignity, launched within weeks. Carter Global helped Marquess redesign their staff training, update their service policies, and implement diversity initiatives across all 40 of their properties. The results were immediate: complaints dropped, employee morale improved, and bookings increased. And Aisha, she was hailed in business magazines as a visionary leader who turned personal humiliation into corporate reform. But success brought new challenges, especially for Robert. One afternoon, Aisha was conducting a follow-up visit when she found him in the staff lounge, staring at a training manual. He looked up startled. "Ms. Carter," he said. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I like to check in personally," she replied. "How's the training going?" He hesitated. "It's eye-opening. I didn't realize how many assumptions I made without even thinking. I grew up in a small town. My parents never taught me this stuff. But that's not an excuse." "It's not," Aisha agreed, "but awareness is the first step. What matters is what you do with it." Robert nodded. "I want to be better. Not just because of what happened with you, but because I don't want to be that guy again, the one who judges people before he knows their story." "Then you're already halfway there?" she said. Over the next few months, Robert became one of the most vocal advocates for the hotel's new culture. He even started mentoring junior staff, teaching them the lessons he had learned the hard way. Aisha noticed the change and respected it. She believed in accountability, but she also believed in redemption. Meanwhile, the Face Sweet Justice movement continued to grow. It wasn't just about hotels anymore. It became a rallying cry against bias in all forms of customer service. Airlines, restaurants, even luxury retailers began adopting similar training programs. Aisha was invited to speak at conferences around the world, and Carter Global launched a new division dedicated to consulting on diversity and inclusion. Yet despite all the accolades and success, Aisha remained grounded. She still took the subway when she could. She still stopped to talk to janitors, security guards, and front desk clerks, because she knew that real change wasn't about headlines. It was about everyday actions. One evening, months after the incident, she returned to the Marcus for a private gala. As she entered the lobby, she was greeted by a familiar voice. "Welcome back, Miss Carter." It was Robert, but this time he was wearing a new name tag: Assistant General Manager. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "I hear you've been doing great work." "Thank you," he said. "And thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't do it for you," she replied with a small smile. "I did it for everyone who comes after you." As she walked away, Robert watched her go. A reminder that one person's dignity, once defended, could ripple outward and change an entire system. That night, Aisha stood on the balcony of the grand ballroom, looking out over the glittering city below. Somewhere out there, another black woman was probably walking into a hotel lobby, bracing herself for the same dismissive looks and whispered judgments she had faced. But maybe, just maybe, things would go differently now. Maybe someone would greet her with respect, offer her the room she paid for, and see her for who she truly was. And if they didn't, well, then they'd have to answer to Aisha Carter. Months rolled into a year, and Project Dignity was no longer just a corporate initiative. It was a movement. Carter Global's consulting arm had partnered with over 100 companies across the country, from hotels and airlines to high-end retailers and even tech firms. Everywhere Aisha went, she heard stories of how a single incident, one woman being mocked for paying for the worst room, had changed the way businesses treated their customers. And yet, despite all the accolades, the speaking engagements, and the magazine covers, Aisha remained haunted by one question. How many people had walked away instead of speaking up? How many had swallowed their humiliation and carried it quietly, believing they weren't worth more? That thought kept her pushing forward. One rainy evening, she received an invitation that piqued her interest. A keynote request from the National Service Industry Association, an organization that represented thousands of hotels, airlines, restaurants, and travel agencies. They wanted her to speak on the future of customer experience. It was the kind of event that could shape policy, not just practice. She accepted without hesitation. The venue was a sprawling convention center in Chicago, buzzing with executives, entrepreneurs, and media. When Aisha took the stage, the crowd of over 2,000 fell silent. She wore a sleek black pantsuit and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had not just survived prejudice. She had dismantled it and rebuilt it into something better. When we talk about service, she began, we often talk about efficiency, convenience, luxury. But we rarely talk about humanity. We rarely talk about dignity. And yet, without those, the rest means nothing. She told them the story. Not the sanitized, corporate, friendly version, but the real one. About the sneer in Robert's voice. About the snickers from the guests behind her. About the humiliation that could have followed her all the way back home if she hadn't chosen to stand firm. The truth is, she continued, it was never about a hotel room. It was about how easily people make assumptions, about who belongs and who doesn't. And it was about proving that our worth is not defined by someone else's prejudice. The audience was rapt. Many nodded. Some even wiped away tears. But Aisha wasn't finished. This industry has enormous power, she said, her voice steady and strong. Every interaction, every check-in, every smile or sneer shapes how people feel about themselves. And you, the people in this room, decide whether those experiences uplift or diminish, whether they heal or harm. If we want a future worth building, dignity must become non-negotiable. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Later, at the networking reception, dozens of executives approached her to discuss new partnerships. Among them was a woman named Linda Hawkins, CEO of a global airline. We want you to design a program for our frontline staff, she said. The airline industry desperately needs this perspective. I'd be happy to, Aisha replied. As she sipped her sparkling water and listened to stories from strangers who now felt seen, she realized that the humiliation she endured in that hotel lobby had become something far bigger than herself. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited a fire across industries. But life had more tests in store. A few weeks later, Carter Global prepared for one of its most ambitious launches, a new AI-powered platform designed to detect and reduce bias in customer-facing businesses. The software, named Equiserve, would analyze customer interactions, identify patterns of discrimination, and provide training solutions. It was revolutionary and controversial. Critics claimed it was unnecessary. Others argued it was too invasive. Some even mocked the idea that bias could be measured. But Aisha believed in it with every fiber of her being. This is the next step, she told her team during a late-night strategy session. We've changed policies, we've changed training. Now we're going to change the systems themselves. On launch day, media outlets from around the world attended the press event. Equiserve became the talk of the tech industry, hailed by some as a game changer and derided by others as woke software. But the data spoke for itself. Within 6 months of deployment, client companies reported a 43% decrease in customer complaints related to discrimination and a 27% increase in loyalty scores. Still, not everyone celebrated Aisha's success. One afternoon, as she prepared to leave the office, Naomi entered her office holding a tablet. "You might want to see this," she said. It was a viral video, a disgruntled former employee from Marquess Grand claiming that Aisha's movement was ruining businesses and shaming good people for honest mistakes. The clip had been shared thousands of times, mostly by groups resistant to diversity initiatives. Aisha watched it silently, then sighed. This was inevitable. "Do you want us to respond?" Naomi asked. "No," Aisha said. "The work speaks for itself. Let them talk." And indeed, the numbers spoke louder than the critics. Equiserve continued to grow, Project Dignity expanded globally, and Carter Global cemented its reputation as a pioneer in ethical innovation. One evening, as Aisha walked through the Marquis Grand, now one of their biggest clients, she paused at the front desk. The lobby looked the same, but it felt different. The staff smiled warmly at every guest, no matter how they were dressed. There was no trace of the condescension she had once felt. And standing at the center of it all, training new employees, was Robert. He noticed her and smiled. "Back where it all started. Hard to believe, isn't it?" she replied. "Sometimes I think about that day," he admitted. "And I realize how much I had to unlearn. I used to think I was good at my job. I didn't see the ways I failed people." "That's the beauty of growth," Aisha said. "It shows us who we were, and who we can become." "Do you ever regret not walking away?" he asked. "You could have. Most people would have." Aisha smiled faintly. "I didn't stay for me. I stayed for the next person." Spring sunlight spilled across the Marquis Grand's marble floors as guests, checked in and bellhops, moved briskly through the lobby. It had been 2 years since Aisha Carter walked into this place as a rain-soaked stranger with a duffel bag. And in those 2 years, everything had changed. The hotel was now a case study in transformation, its policies cited in industry conferences, and its culture hailed as a model for inclusivity. But for Aisha, this was never just about one hotel. It was about creating a ripple effect that stretched far beyond these walls. She walked through the lobby unnoticed at first. No fanfare, no cameras. Just a woman revisiting the place where her journey had taken a new turn. But when Robert spotted her, he quickly approached with the warm familiarity of an old friend. "Mems Carter?" he greeted, smiling. "It's always an honor to see you." "Please, Robert," she said, shaking his hand. "We've been through too much for formalities." He laughed. "Fair enough." They walked together toward the Atrium Cafe, where she had agreed to speak to the hotel's newest recruits. The staff, a mix of young faces and seasoned professionals, waited eagerly, notebooks in hand. Many had read about her story in training manuals, but few expected to meet the woman behind the movement. "I know most of you have heard the story," Aisha began, her voice calm and steady. "But I want to tell you what it really meant. Not for me, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel small." She paused, letting the silence settle over the room. "When I walked into this hotel that day, I wasn't just a guest. I was a test of how much dignity mattered here. And at that moment, the hotel failed. But what happened next is the reason we're all here today. Because failure doesn't have to be final. It can be the first step towards something extraordinary." The recruits hung on every word. Some scribbled notes furiously, others simply watched, their expressions thoughtful. "You are the face of this hotel," Aisha continued. "Your actions shape how people see not just this brand, but themselves. Every smile, every gesture, every decision you make has the power to lift someone up or tear them down. Never forget that." After the session, a young woman approached her shyly. "Ms. Carter," she said, "I started working here because of you. I saw your interview online, the one about dignity, and it made me want to be part of the solution." Aisha's smile was genuine and warm. "Then you already are. Later that afternoon, she headed upstairs to one of the executive suites, the same type of room she had originally booked all those years ago. But this time, the hotel insisted she stay in their presidential suite complimentary. The irony wasn't lost on her. She stood by the window, looking down at the bustling city below, and allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The truth was, Aisha's journey had been about much more than proving a point. It was about rewriting narratives. Not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or disrespected because of how they looked. It was about changing an industry that had long turned a blind eye to the subtle ways it devalued people. And it was about building a future where dignity wasn't an afterthought. It was the standard. That future was closer than ever. Equiserve had now been adopted by over 400 companies worldwide, including some of the largest hotel chains and airlines. Project Dignity was now a foundation, funding scholarships and programs to train young people from underrepresented communities for leadership roles in the service sector. And Carter Global had become one of the fastest growing ethical tech companies in the country. But with every success came new battles. There were still critics, still skeptics, still those who dismissed her work as unnecessary. Aisha knew they would always exist. Change, after all, didn't happen because everyone agreed it was needed. It happened because enough people refused to accept the alternative. That night, she attended a gala in the hotel's grand ballroom, hosted in her honor. Executives, activists, and public figures gathered to celebrate the movement she had sparked. As she stepped onto the stage to speak, the applause was deafening. But Aisha raised her hands gently, urging them to quiet down. "I want to be clear about something," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "This was never about me getting a better room. It was about every person who's ever been told, silently or directly, that they don't belong. It was about every young black woman who's been talked down, to every immigrant family treated like an inconvenience, every person judged by the color of their skin before a single word left their mouth. It was about dignity. It is about dignity. And that's something none of us should ever have to pay extra for." The audience rose to their feet once again, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Aisha's gaze drifted to the back of the room, where Robert stood, clapping the loudest. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange was a shared understanding of who they once were and who they had become. After the gala, Aisha slipped away to the rooftop terrace, needing a moment of solitude beneath the city's star-scattered sky. Naomi joined her a few minutes later. "Big night," she said, handing her a glass of sparkling water. "Bigger than I expected," Aisha admitted with a smile. "You know," Naomi said, leaning on the railing. "It's funny. All of this, the policies, the foundation, the software, the global partnerships, it all started because one man tried to mock you for booking a room. Life has a strange way of starting revolutions," Aisha replied. They stood there in silence for a while, the city humming below them, the future stretched out like a canvas waiting to be painted. Finally, Naomi asked, "What's next?" Aisha took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "Next, we keep going. Because as long as there's even one person left feeling invisible, our work isn't done." She turned and walked back inside, her steps confident and steady. She was no longer the woman who had been mocked in a hotel lobby. She was the woman who had changed the world, one act of dignity at a time. And somewhere, perhaps in another city or another country, another Aisha Carter was stepping into a lobby, facing the same skepticism, the same prejudice. But this time, things might be different. This time, someone might greet her with a smile. This time, the room she paid for might be waiting. No questions asked. Because now, The world knew. Dignity is not a privilege. It's a right. And it belongs to all of us. They stood there for a moment in silence, both reflecting on how far they'd come. One from ignorance to awareness, the other from humiliation to impact. And in that silence, Aisha realized something profound. What had once been a story about prejudice had become a story about transformation.